on Failed Racers. We've covered a few unsuccessful race cars and rally cars already, and we plan to cover many more too. This brings me onto a new feature that'll be at the end of each video. For now, it will be called the Failed Racers Super Scoreboard, but if you have an idea for a better name for it, write that in the comments. The Failed Racers Super Scoreboard won't compare which car is the fastest. These are failed racers after all. Most of them aren't all that fast. Instead, the scoreboard will be a bit of a subjective fun at the end of each video. The Super Scoreboard will assess cars on their cool factor, how good they look, how much potential they had, how innovative they were, how big the gap was between expectations and reality, and whether it had any memorable performances against the odds. But the cars we've already seen haven't been put on the scoreboard yet. So, let's rank the cars we've got to get the ball rolling for the Super Scoreboard. Don't let the wing or flared wheel arches fool you. The 307 WRC is still a Peugeot convertible. Would you want to be seen in public driving around in a Peugeot convertible? That being said, rally cars are all pretty cool. Driving 200 km/h sideways on a slippery road lined with cliffs is cool in any circumstance. Put Marcus Grönholm in the car and enter in one of the most competitive times in WRC history, and you've got heaps of coolness, despite the fact that it's a Peugeot convertible. The 307 WRC gets a 6 out of 10 for the cool factor. The fact that it's a Peugeot convertible doesn't just affect the cool factor. The looks are also hit hard. This was a car that came at a time when Peugeot had just stopped using Pininfarina designs. The car looked like it was made out of pure plastic, and the folding roof mechanism made the beginning of what should have been a nice sloping roofline abruptly end. It's as if Peugeot just gave up designing the car halfway through. It's possibly one of the ugliest rally cars ever. 307? More like 2 out of 10. The video title I used for the 307 WRC was Untapped Potential. That really says a lot about what I believe the 307 was capable of. The car showed genuinely good pace. It easily won its first ever WRC stage, but the terrible choice of a 4-speed gearbox, horrible reliability, a badly timed switch to Pirelli tyres, and an underfunded privateer effort meant the car never realised its potential. It wasn't just the design that led to reliability issues too. Grönholm retired from the Rally of Australia in 2005 because loose bolts caused the suspension to collapse. Even a well-designed car will fail if you don't even bother to screw the thing together properly. Had Peugeot been competent during the mid-2000s, the 307 would have been a real championship contender. The Peugeot 307 gets a 10 out of 10 for potential. Early 2000s in WRC featured loads of cool tech. This was the era of the fully active car. The 307 was certainly a fully active car. It had all the gizmos you'd expect to find and more. Active suspension, yes. Paddle shift? Had that too. Fully active transmission system? Absolutely. But it wasn't just those systems. Peugeot even tried out a dual clutch gearbox that had the most powerful engine of any world rally car, and the convertible base made the downforce to drag ratio very favourable. The 307 WRC was truly a pioneering car. It was one of the most innovative cars in the field, and that's a field including the mighty Citroën Zara World Rally car in its prime. The Peugeot 307 WRC gets a 9 out of 10 for innovation. The 307 replaced the championship-winning and legendary 206 World Rally car. Peugeot had a big budget and big expectations. This was a car that was supposed to win the championship. In 2004, it fell quite short of that mark. But in 2005, Peugeot finished second in the World Rally Championship. Whilst it may have been far off the Citroën score, it's not like the car was spending its whole time down the bottom of the timesheets. It won many stages and was often fighting for wins. But it would lose out thanks to its lack of reliability, terrible tyres and other various shenanigans. The The 307 fell short of its expectations, but it wasn't a total failure. The gap between expectations and reality was there, but it wasn't huge. The 307 gets 5 out of 10. The Peugeot's inherent pace made it a car capable of frequently fighting at the front, but Peugeot managed to perfect the art of clutching defeat from the jaws of victory. Disqualification from first place in Cyprus 2004 due to an illegal water pump was a prime example of Peugeot's incompetence in 2004. The car never had underdog status. It was the complete opposite. It was a car that should have won frequently, which ended up winning only very rarely. Peugeot managed to perform badly against all odds, but this category is about if the car performed well against all odds. The Peugeot 307 gets a 2 out of 10. Overall, this gives the car a 5.7 out of 10. Front engine and front wheel drive are not terms that are often used in the same sentence as cool car. That's not to say there aren't any cool front wheel drive cars. All hot hatches are cool, and most of those are front wheel drive. Front wheel drive may be associated with Toyota Priuses and Mitsubishi Mirages, but the Nissan GT-R LM is not a Toyota Prius, nor is it a Mitsubishi Mirage. This was a car that came from a golden era. The era of LMP1 hybrids, an era of manufacturers doing whatever they felt like in prototype racing, the era of insanely high speeds and diverse cars. The GT-R LM Nismo, despite achieving absolutely nothing as a car, was the epitome of this era. It was completely different. It had everyone talking about it. It stole the show and it wasn't even good. The GT-R LM Nismo gets a 9 out of 10. The Nissan GT-R LM Nismo was a crazy looking machine. It looked like absolutely nothing else. It wasn't beautiful like the Porsche 919. It wasn't as aggressive and focused looking as the Audi R18, but somehow I still like how it looks. It has a character to its appearance. It looks striking and bold. The Nissan GT-R LM Nismo gets a 7 out of 10. The myth that keeps on giving when it comes to the GT-R LM Nismo is that the lack of hybrid was the only reason it was so slow. The reality is, the car's front-wheel drive design would never work, and here's why. Let's imagine the hybrid system works. Now it has 1,250 horsepower. But the LMP1 rules had a limit on hybrid energy deployment per lap. For the GT-R, that was 8 megajoules. With 750 of that 1,250 horsepower coming from the hybrid system, you'd very quickly run out of available hybrid energy running such a high electrical power output. The car was 20 seconds per lap slower. Adding a hybrid system that can't even run for 20 seconds per lap isn't going to make the car 20 seconds per lap faster. Even if it can very briefly produce an insanely high power output, the Nissan GT-R LM Nismo gets a 2 out of 10. The GT-R LM Nismo was like absolutely nothing that's come before and after it. It had very efficient aerodynamics. It was supposed to use a flywheel hybrid system. It attempted to completely rewrite the book on how to make a Le Mans prototype. The car was the very definition of innovation. The GT-R LM Nismo gets a 10 out of 10. The Nissan GT-R LM Nismo had everyone talking about it. It was supposed to change the way prototypes were made. It was supposed to dominate. In reality, it was closer to the pace of a GT car than to leading the LMP1 field. The gap between expectations and reality couldn't have been bigger. The GT-R LM Nismo gets a 10 out of 10. The GT-R LM only entered into one race. The odds were stacked heavily against them, and they didn't perform. They didn't punch above their weight, but they also didn't underperform relative to the inherent pace of the car. The car just didn't have any inherent pace. For that reason, the GT-R LM Nismo can only get a 5 out of 10. Overall, the GT-R LM Nismo gets a 7.2 out of 10. The nickname, Czech Tank, says a lot about this car's cool factor. The car's toughness, big size and big mass gave it a huge following. When Dirtfish ran a poll for what the most loved world rally car of all time was, the Octavia won by a landslide. And there was definitely nothing fishy or unusual about that poll or any Facebook group that wanted it to have a certain outcome. The iconic photo of the Octavia on 3 wheels or the Czech Tank safari spec car are examples of just how cool the Octavia really is. The Skoda Octavia gets a 10 out of 10. The sharp lines and solid proportions and the functional look make the Octavia WRC an incredible looking rally car. The Octavia WRC gets a 10 out of 10. The Octavia WRC had many Evo updates, solid reliability in its later years, and competent drivers. It may have had more to give, but it's clear the car never could have amounted to much, even in perfect circumstances. Really, the only way for it to have been successful was if Volkswagen had have given Skoda a more comparable budget to its competitors from the start. Of course, had the team been properly funded and not run on a budget no bigger than your average fish and chip shop's daily revenue, the car could have done better. The Octavia gets a 3 out of 10. The Octavia WRC never adopted paddle shift. It never had an active suspension system. It was not a fully active car in the era of fully active cars. The Octavia WRC didn't do anything that another car hasn't already done. The Octavia WRC gets a 0 out of 10. People didn't know what to expect with the Octavia WRC. Skoda had never been in the top class of the WRC, only in the lower classes. People weren't expecting it to be bad. They weren't expecting it to be good. Despite this, I still think the car failed to live up to its expectations. It was nowhere near the pace in pretty much every rally. It rarely ever scored points, and even in its 4th year in the WRC, it was still a poor performer. Skoda would find itself constantly near or at the bottom of the manufacturer's championship, and nothing would improve for the entire time Skoda ran the Octavia. The Octavia gets a 7 out of 10. The Octavia had just one trick. It was very strong. In Kenya, they used their one trick. They didn't have the pace, but thanks to their strength and reliability, they were able to finish on the podium. The car had never been anywhere near the podium before, and it had absolutely no business being there, but the Czech Tank found its way there anyway. The Octavia WRC gets a 9 out of 10. Overall, this gives the Octavia a 6.5 out of 10. The Skoda Fabia WRC was the sequel. It's not the original Skoda World Rally car. It didn't get the podium in Kenya. It wasn't the Czech Tank. But that's not to say it's not a cool car in its own right. It was driven by Colin McRae and Didier Aurier. It came from a team with a small budget, something that always makes a car cooler. It picked up right where the Octavia left off. The Skoda Fabia gets an 8 out of 10. Yet another amazing looking rally car from Skoda. Sharp lines, perfect proportions and an iconic livery make the Skoda Fabia one of the best looking world rally cars. The Fabia WRC gets a 10 out of 10. Colin McRae proved the car was capable of podium positions when a bit of attrition was on the cards. The car's lack of prior performance didn't mean it couldn't have been turned into something fast. It never managed a podium and rarely bothered those in the points-paying positions. But its direct successor in the top class, the VW Polo WRC, became the most successful World Rally car of all time, winning 84% of events that it entered, as well as every driver's and every manufacturer's World Championship it entered. Arguably, another direct successor, based on the same PQ24 platform, the Fabia S2000, became the most successful S2000 car of all time. The Fabia R5 after that became the most successful R5 car of all time. It seemed that despite the Fabia WRC's lack of performance on its own, everything after it that shared a similar platform became immediately a massive success. The Fabia WRC gets a 10 out of 10 for potential. The Fabia WRC, again, didn't try anything new, but at least it wasn't completely outdated anymore, and did somewhat keep up with the technology of the day. The Fabia gets a 4 out of 10. The Fabia was expected to propel Skoda closer towards the front of the World Rally Championship. It may not have had World Rally Championship winning expectations, but picking up podiums here and there and consistent points finishes were expected from the Octavia's much smaller, more innovative and more modernised successor. But it ended up performing no better than the Octavia, making it fall short of expectations by quite some margin. The Fabia WRC, therefore, gets a 7 out of 10. Colin McRae, nearly bringing the Fabia to the podium, definitely raised some eyebrows. The car certainly punched above its weight, but the team failed here. The service went OTL, so the car retired. The Fabia gets a 6 out of 10 for this one, but it would have been a 10 had it not been for the OTL. Overall, this gives the Fabia a 7.5 out of 10. This sets the beginning of our Super Scoreboard. The Fabia WRC is first with a score of 7.5. The Nissan GT-R LM Nismo is second with 7.2. The Octavia third with 6.5. And the 307 WRC fourth with 5.7. Make sure you don't miss the next cars that'll come up on this Super Scoreboard by subscribing to the channel so you can see the next videos as they come out. Coming soon will be the video on the Seat Cordoba WRC.